Welcome to the CPA Advisory Show. I am your host, Jeremy Wells, CPA, and with me is my co-host, Chris Hervishon, CPA. Chris, how you doing?
Doing great, Jeremy. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. Thank you for asking, and I'm really excited about this episode. We have a guest who is actually not an accountant. I think we've had a couple guests now that are non-accountants, but working closely in the space of what we do. So I am pleased to welcome John Tobin, who is actually an attorney. And John's going to tell us a little bit about how he is doing things a little differently than what we've come to expect and what we usually see in the legal space. So welcome, John. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing.
Yeah, cool. Thanks for having me both. So I'm an attorney. I work primarily with artists, other creatives, people in technology, media. I'm in Los Angeles, so that's pretty big here, and there's a lot of crossover between all of those worlds. And so it's nice to be involved with that. So I started my own firm basically out of law school. And, from the very beginning, I wanted to do something different. So I'd always been looking for, different ways to practice law. One of the things, and I think, Jeremy, we had talked before we went on here, just about how the billable hour is kind of like the predominant way in legal and maybe in accounting, but in a lot of spaces, it's kind of the way that things are done. So I'm like, well, what is there a different way? Because I knew that a lot of the people I wanted to work with, that just wouldn't necessarily work for them. So tried a bunch of different things. And the thing that I kind of, set on that really has worked and that we've been doing for quite a while, and, I think we're the first law firm to do this, is to create a subscription. So basically create a subscription model where someone can join us, they can join the monthly subscription and then have access to the team of attorneys that we have here. So that's the way we do it, and so that's a way for people to enter working with us. We do a lot of other work on a flat fee basis, but we really try, and I tell pretty much everybody, like I'd say most of our work, 95% is not involving the billable hour. There's obviously situations where that's appropriate, but for us and the kind of work we do, which is mainly transactional, not like litigation or court stuff, um, it's pretty much flat fee or subscription is how we do our business.
So how many attorneys do you have working with you?
So we have 3 core attorneys, and then we have a number of contract attorneys, because one of the things with subscriptions is we review agreements. So we have a lot of attorneys who kind of come on as there's overflow or a lot of contracts come in, they'll help us. So 3 core attorneys, and then just like a team of contract attorneys who help us.
So what's included in this subscription, right? I mean, we think about the billable hour, and it's pretty much relatively unlimited scope, right? Like as long as the clock's running, we'll keep doing more work for you because we know we're going to turn around and bill you for it. But if you're doing this subscription model, if you've got X amount a month, then you've got to put some bounds around what you're willing to do. So what is a typical scope for a subscription offering from your firm look like for a client?
Yeah, so the general way I explain it to people who are just encountering us for the first time is that it really is about giving you access and conversations with an attorney. So to kind of replace the whole thing of spending hours of time on the internet trying to figure it out yourself. I mean, this is actually what made me start it. Was like I would talk to people and they're like, I spent the entire weekend looking up how to, do some random thing with an LLC, or, they contact me 6 months after something bad happened that kind of snowballed. They're like, yeah, they didn't want to call or talk to an attorney because they were afraid of just getting billed a random number, right? So really it's about being able to pick up the phone, or more accurately schedule a call with us and us call you, and then be able to talk through things. So typically I say most of this stuff is like those conversations. If we ever move into like forming an LLC or registering a trademark, drafting a contract, those are things that we bill separately on a flat fee basis. So one of the things that I always have to point out, and it's funny, a lot of attorneys who've asked me about this are like, well, what happens if someone goes to court? I'm like, yeah, we don't do that. That's not part, the clients get it. The clients get that, yeah, this is just for you to start engaging with a lawyer, start working with a lawyer.
Yeah, I love that. The communication, right, and the providing that peace of mind component is what I think is completely missing from the typical sort of billable hour model, right? Is that we're so focused on getting the job done that we're not thinking about what the real impact here is on the client. I've had clients come to me just because they emailed their former accountant with a question, or they called the former accountant with a question, and then a week later they get an invoice, right, that they've got to pay. And to them, it was a 20-minute phone call to make sure that they were on the right track, and then 3 or 4 days later you get a $400 bill in the mail, right,
Yeah.
for that, and it just doesn't seem right. And so they're looking for an alternative to that. And so yeah, I think leading with the peace of mind, right, that you can generate
Hmm.
for those clients is probably going to lead to a much better result downstream, both in terms of just happier clients as well as your own bottom line, right, as
Yeah.
opposed to just billing for every minute that you're
Right.
or tenth of a minute or however you're tracking that down the line.
Yeah, and I think what it kind of does. I mean, like I said earlier, there's always a time and place for billable. I think for if you're like a trial, like you don't know how long it's going to take to prepare. So how else are you going to do it? But I think for the kind of work that I do, which is it's not really anything contested. It's like I want to set up an LLC, I want to register a trademark. We know how much that's going to be, so we do flat fee there. But then with subscription, um, there's not that kind of tension of I'm calling you and I feel like I have to cut this short because I know that every 6 minutes I'm getting hit with another $30. So that tension isn't there. So I can talk with people, and I feel like building that relationship, the relationships that we build, that helps a lot of stuff, and it does build trust so that when we're like, okay, so actually now, we need you to pay 3 grand for this. And we tell them up front, they're like, cool, I get it. Like, you guys know what I'm about, you know what we're doing. So totally ready to do that.
So, John, I'd have to imagine that they don't teach subscription models in law school. So, what was the
No,
probably not. So, what was the trigger for
no.
you to go out on your own and say, "I'm going to do it this way"? Like, what was the background? What was the background event, or what did you see, or what did you take inspiration from in order to move your business in that way?
Yeah, so a good question because before as a lawyer, I actually worked in creative fields. So I was a software developer and a designer. So I worked in those fields. And so when I was at law school, and in law school, they kind of expose you to, hey, here's how the other firms bill. If you're working at this big firm, you're going to bill $500 an hour, and it's going to be great. And so I'd hear that, and I'd be like, all right, so nobody I know is going to pay that. You know, like nobody's going to pay that. So is there a way, like, and I started thinking, like, why does it have to be that much? Is that by design? Is that by necessity? What is it? And, I think now, I mean, my conclusion, it's kind of just by tradition. There are enough people who will pay $500. Like, that's nothing. Like, if you're a large oil company or a bank or an insurance company, cool. I mean, you might put back on some of the hours, but overall, $500 an hour is totally fine. So, my point is that's not a bad model for those kind of clients. But the people I was wanting to work with, which are people that, I knew from my previous career, aren't going to pay that. And, there are some people who do, and we do on occasion do hourly stuff, but usually because there's like a big opportunity, like they're selling a show to Amazon or Netflix or something. Then in that case, we're like, okay, we're going to do it hourly because there's a negotiation. So I was looking for that. And so I think subscription came up, just in conversations with other people kind of, and I obviously saw subscriptions out there and I'm like, well, why can't you do that? And I started reading about subscriptions and learning about it, seeing utilization rates and lifetime value. And so kind of thinking more broadly about, how a law firm can earn money, and what does it take to make something that's valuable for people that also makes money for the firm, So it was an experiment at first, and it kind of came from just like that impulse of wanting to serve people who aren't going to pay like $500 hourly rates.
So are you time tracking within your firm? Are you tracking your own time, or your other attorneys that are working for you? Are you tracking time that you're spending on the work?
Yeah, we often do. I mean, simply because we want to know, we just want to make sure like we're making enough money, because, if you think about the resource of our time or the team's time, that obviously costs up. We have to pay people. So I just want to make sure that we're never kind of slipping into something where it's like, oh, look, we made $50 an hour, and I have to pay you $75 an hour or something. I don't ever want to get into that situation. So yeah, we do, but it's never something that kind of bills out to the client.
So, what are some of the most common issues that you see small business clients bring you? Like, what are the things that they struggle with, and the things that have the highest potential to go wrong?
Yeah, so I mean, honestly, at the core, and I think the person that we can probably help the most is the person who they know they should be doing legal stuff and they don't really know what it is. So I think the first like core problem is people just not really understanding what a lawyer does. A lot of people, even people who are sophisticated, think lawyer, okay, someone who wears a suit and goes to court and likes to argue. And so a lot of business owners are like, well, nothing's going wrong, everything's cool. Don't need a lawyer because I don't need that. And so I think that's the kind of first thing. And then there's like an unwillingness to engage even with legal stuff, especially for creative people. They're like, well, I'm an artist. I don't need to get involved in like copyright, trademark, and setting up an LLC. And, our whole thing is like when we start working with someone, we're trying to like do a mind shift to them where they're like, no, like that's if you're making a living doing this, you got to know something about it. Like if you're an artist, you're not selling art, you're actually selling copyrights, or selling title to a physical good. If you're an artist, you're building a brand. So, whether or not you choose to acknowledge it is up to you. But our whole thing is we want to make sure that that's what you're doing. So that's like the core problem. But I mean, I think more specifically, maybe this is more what you're asking is, um, biggest things, the biggest problems are not setting up a company right. So, not doing an LLC or a corporation the right way, forgetting bylaws, forgetting operating agreements, trademarks, not really doing a search. So not really understanding that, if there's another brand out there that's like yours, that person has rights and then getting into a conflict with them and then not having good contracts, and I have a lot of people who come, after something has gone wrong and they're like, okay, I don't want that to happen again. How do I write contracts where I can avoid these crazy conflicts I've been living with? So those are kind of like, I would say like the core problems that people have. It's that mindset shift plus, those specific things I mentioned.
Yeah, we always get nervous when a client comes to us and is like, "Hey, I just registered an LLC." It's like,
Right.
okay, you know, what, how, right? Like, did you
Right.
use a professional? Did you use an online service? Did you just go and do it yourself, right? And then 6 months later, we find out that not only did they register an LLC, but they did it with a couple of buddies of theirs, right? And so
Yeah.
now they've got a partnership, and now we've got to get into questions about, did you do an operating agreement? Of course not, right? And so it just kind of snowballs
Right.
really quickly, right, into a situation where the technology, right, and the fact that almost every state's Department of State has a website to make it really easy to
Hmm.
go and register an LLC, right?
Oh
It,
yeah.
it just it's so easy that it's that typical. It's so easy anybody can do it, but actually doing it the correct way, is the problem, and then the repercussions of not having
Yeah.
done it the correct way. And so, yeah, I think there needs to be a lot of ways that we make it just as easy to get the professional help that you need to do this the right way as it is to go and do it yourself, right? And so, yeah,
Yeah.
this kind of relatively easy, straightforward idea of, hey, here's a group of professionals that'll help me, and I can just click a button, same way I would set up a Netflix account, right? Like I can just click a button and
Yeah.
now I'm getting that help that I need, as opposed to I've got to call someone and then they're going to invoice me and I don't really know how much and I don't really know what they do, like you said. And so, yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's a huge benefit to the client base to put that out there as a way to uh, do it that way. And it's really interesting to me that it comes from your experience before you came into law
Hmm.
school. So when you've talked to other attorneys about this model, do you notice a difference in the reception based on like the attorney's backgrounds, right? Like if they came straight into law, like out of college, do you get a different reaction from like if this is their second or third career, right? The accounting is my
Right.
second career. So I don't bring in the bias of I've always been an accountant. So I
It's
do
not a
everything
good
the way the
point.
industry
Yeah.
has always done it, right?
Yeah. So yeah, there's definitely different reactions. So the coolest thing, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately, is seeing like a lot of the younger attorneys now having seen this as a model, pick it up. Like that's pretty sweet. Like to see, other people being like, oh, okay, this can be done. I'm gonna do it. And in some cases, adding things or changing the way it's done, and kind of seeing how that's influenced people. There's a lot of younger attorneys now where when I graduated law school like 10 years ago, you couldn't really form your own firm. Like nobody did that. I think I was like the only one of my class who had done that. um, so you didn't do that, but now you see a lot of like newer attorneys willing to do it. Older attorneys, the response kind of varies, and by older, I don't necessarily mean like age, I mean career, right? So, I've gotten a variety of responses. Sometimes I talk to someone and I can see they're kind of like, "Oh, that's cute," we'll see how that works, and I know other people who are like generally fascinated. Well, I've been practicing for 30 years and I've never seen anything like this. Walk me through it. I like talking to those people. The other ones, I'm just kind of like, yeah, okay, it works, like, and I think at the beginning it was actually funny because like, people would ask me like, does it work? Like other attorneys would be like, does it work? I'm like, well, I'm doing it. It's not like I'm not in this for playtime. I don't have like family money or something like that to support me. It has to work. So if it didn't work, I would stop. So, I think that's the thing. That skepticism has gone away. I think it's been, it's become more accepted. And I think people are getting that you can actually do that now.
So, how do you distinguish your practice and what you do and how you do it from other subscription type model services that are out there in the legal profession, like I don't know, like a LegalZoom or a Rocket Lawyer or something like that,
Yeah.
where those are subscription models too, and they have kind of that option where you can call an attorney or something like that. I'm wondering just how that conversation goes and how you kind of frame that.
Yeah, good one. Because what I have noticed is, yeah, they do have it. What I've seen and what I've heard from clients who have tried those before coming to us is that the quality is really varied. So it might be like buying like a PC. Sometimes you get a really freaking good one, and other times, like I bought laptops where I'm like, why? Like, I got one for my son, and like within 2 years, like this, you got to get an Apple. You got to get a Mac. Whereas for me, like I'm like a Mac guy, and I want things to be like a tight ecosystem, a tight kind of experience. So that's usually the difference I explain. I'm like, and you're not talking with a lot of those actually at LegalZoom. Their model's a little bit different in what they're doing is they're referring the work out to random law firms, right? So, it'll basically be, okay, you're going to talk to, such and such and such and such, who normally does like dog bite cases, but he's going to walk you through the trademark. And I'm exaggerating only a little bit
Yeah.
there, like, because even as a lawyer, I've actually encountered materials or I've encountered those lawyers in the field. I remember calling one of those guys and I'm like, wait, are you just rolling out of bed like literally right now as I'm talking to you? Because that's what it sounded like. Um, so that's what I kind of say. I'm like, it's more like, I don't, maybe not a premium experience, but it's kind of like more premium and focused experience. The LegalZoom tends to be kind of generalized, and this is more like specialty. Like you're a creative and you really want to get it done right and talk with people about deep experience versus kind of broad experience, and we're very clear what we don't do. So like if you have a landlord problem, can't help, dog bite, can't help, maybe I can refer you, but we just really keep it focused on what we do well.
Yeah, very cool. And Jeremy, you'll be interested in this, but I had one yesterday. Client comes to me. We're getting ready to do his 2021 return. And he's like, "Oh, well, I got an S corp last year." Like, did you? Okay. Use one of those subscription services. I won't say which one. And I'm like, "Well, did they file the S election for you?" He's like, "I don't know. How would I find it?" And so we're poking around on the website together. And sure enough, he paid for this S election, but there's no form there. It doesn't show anything as submitted. And he comes back to me a couple hours later and he says, "They gave me this form." I'm like, "Okay, cool, but did you sign it and did you file it?" Like, "I don't know. How would I know?" It's like,
Yeah.
so I mean, that's how those types of things go wrong. That's what I see. And similar to your experience, when clients come to us, I'm like, "Oh yeah, I use LegalZoom or use Rocket Lawyer or use whatever." It's like, okay, but you know, the it comes to us clearly, and there's errors and there's problems and things like that. And clearly, it was like half DIY, and they didn't actually talk to an attorney. And we see all those sorts of problems. So I
Yeah.
think it's interesting the way that you're doing it, because you're actually having a relationship with a law firm, right?
Yeah.
It sounds like you're very clear on what you will do and what you won't do.
Yeah, we're very targeted. And, I think, and because I'll get these questions, like when I'm talking to leads or someone who wants to work with us or, you know, in any kind of situation where I'm talking about what we do, I'll tell people, go look at our reviews, just go Google us, look at our reviews, go Google, fill in the blank legal service, look at their reviews. And then I don't need to say anything else. Like that's literally my entire argument, because you're going to get what you pay
Yeah.
for, and I tell people like, look, if you're in business, legal, accounting, stuff like that, not really the places you want to cut corners. Like I'll talk to people and I know they'll spend like, $5,000 on a website, but they're like, will balk at spending like half that to make sure their brand is protected. I'm like, really? Like, you're going to replace the website in 3 years anyways,
Yeah, right. And there's an aspect there, back to Chris's S corp story, or there's so many of these cases where it's checking off boxes on both sides, right? Like the client is seeing the list of things and they're saying, okay, this is getting done, right? And then the service is just saying, yeah, we did this, we sent you this form, right? We didn't really tell you what to do with it, but we sent it to you, so we can check our box off, right? Versus what I've seen where it's So with a partnership, for example, with the partnership agreement or the operating agreement, it'll be it'll obviously just be a template, right? That
Yeah.
some the names are changed, but everything else is the same. But then there are key parts that you would expect to see if an actual attorney with experience working with partnerships wrote this, that are just completely missing,
Mhm.
right? So when are the partners going to take distributions? Are there guaranteed payments, right? Little things
Right.
like that they weren't part of the template and therefore they're not part of the final product, but they
They don't
feel
need
like
to.
they have an
Yeah.
operating agreement in place, so everything's
Yeah.
good, right? And then I get
They checked
this,
off the box.
yeah, then I get this, and I'm trying to prepare the tax return, and I'm like, I don't know what to do here. I don't know what to put here because there's
Right.
nothing in the operating agreement about it. Whereas, an actual human that can still operate a very similar business model, right? A subscription based similar model,
Yeah.
but
No doubt.
add 5, 10, 15 minutes into the process for a human to look over it and ask
Hmm.
some questions, really dramatically improves the value of the output.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's also the motivations, I mean, as I'm assuming that, as CPAs, it's kind of the same thing. Like there's that ethical duty. Like if someone worked with me, we have to do it right. Like, assuming nothing weird happens, like we have to do the job right, which so we're optimizing for getting things right and for client experience. Whereas a lot of these services, they're optimizing for profit quarterly reports for the private equity firms that own them, that's just the reality. They're not really caring about the experience as long as money's coming.
I'm curious, how do you model utilization? So, how long did you have to get, how long or how far into the subscription based model were you before you sort of started to understand, like, okay, for every incremental client that I bring on, they're going to use up this much of my time, this much of my other attorney's time, or, what does the average client, what do they utilize in a given year, a given month,
Right.
that sort of thing? Like, how much experience did you need? And then how do you think about modeling that out as you expand your practice?
Yeah, cool question. So I think, I mean, I want to say that I probably didn't do anything like that until I was about a year or two in. I don't remember, but I do remember doing it for the first time because I'm like, okay, now let's, look at potentially a disaster or something that works out really well, so I think I wanted to make sure that I was fully invested and that I could get enough people and that, in terms of as an attractive product, it worked, so I think by the time I don't know, maybe a couple dozen people, I'm like, okay, let's see where we're at. And so, um, and I kind of do a variation on this now, but I basically, took the time. So overall took the time that everybody uses altogether. So this is like the kind of the big dumb way that I would do it. Take all the time. Let's say we spent 18 hours and we have, X number of clients. Then I just kind of divide it up and say like, okay, each person uses on average, this much time every month, and then kind of almost in a way convert that just because at the beginning, I did want to compare like, what does that make an hourly rate look like? So if we're making this much and, each client is getting this much time, what are we making hourly? That was my initial, kind of thought. Now I look at it from like a lifetime customer value type of thing. So, as I built this, then I started to read about subscriptions generally and how you work that as a business. And so for me, the um, big metrics are churn rate and lifetime customer value. So really optimizing for the longer we can get someone to stay, the better our margin is because, obviously there's upfront costs for marketing and, even kind of at the very beginning, just to get familiar and, spend a little bit extra time with people just to make sure we know what's going on. Then if we can spread that out over a longer time period, that's going to work out better than if someone joins and a month later they quit. And it happens. And, we definitely plan for, we do have people who come in and a month later they're gone. Maybe it just wasn't what they're looking for. Maybe they just had one question and, moved on. Maybe they went out of business. And we have had people who have been on there since the beginning, you know?
So what does the
So,
screening
yeah.
process look like when you bring on a new client?
So, I mean, basically the main thing is like, we don't want any conflicts of interest. So obviously if someone's, working with one of our clients or, in some sort of conflict, then we just can't do it. The other thing is, is their need served by what we're offering? So kind of like I was saying earlier, if the person's like, hey, I need help with my landlord, we're going to be like, hey, this might not be the right thing. One of the big things we also screen for is people who are looking for help with litigation. Because, like I said early on, a lot of people think lawyer, I'm going to go sue somebody. So if someone's like, yeah, like, I'm in this fight and I need to get out there and I need to like file a suit against someone, that's one where, the assistant will call and be like, hey, just so you know, here's what we do. Like, we're not going to be doing that. We recommend you contact a litigator.
So is that like a discovery call process? Or is that like a form on the website? What does that actually look like?
Yeah, so it depends on how people contact us, but usually our first contact is like if you call us, we have our answering service. They're going to ask a few questions, tell us about you, tell us about what you're doing, give me your contact info, and then they send us notes. So we get an email. We use a service called Smith AI. There's a lot of other ones, but that's our favorite one. They'll send us notes, and we'll look at that. And again, if it's a clear no, then we'll just send them a polite email saying, hey, we're unfortunately not able to help you. Best of luck. We encourage you to look for appropriate counsel, stuff like that. Um, then if they make it past that, then it's going to be typically we'll have some sort of screening call depending, I try to have my assistant reach out to them and be like, hey, just wanted to get more information about what you're doing. And that goes well, then they can sign up. Sometimes they want to talk to us. They want to talk to me or my partner or an attorney just to often feel reassurance because at that point I can't offer advice. So I'm like, yeah, that's something we have experience with. So we'll help you. So it's kind of that. We're actually currently working on streamlining that a lot. Like what I'd like to actually have is like, I don't want to make it a complicated questionnaire, but a questionnaire that asks the right questions so that someone, really we look at it like route them to the right thing. If the right things are subscription, great. Well, if it's not, then still maybe find somebody to help them. Be like, hey, here's like a list of, organizations who can connect you with a lawyer for your landlord tenant issue or something. Or if it's someone who, we have a lot of people who come to us for flat fee services. So someone's like straight up, I want to do a trademark. Cool. I'm not gonna go on about subscription if all they're trying to do is register a trademark and they already know what they want.
Yeah, I love that you're figuring this out. So the metrics you were talking about, lifetime value and your churn rate and those kinds of things, and that it's an experiment, right? And I
Yeah.
think we, like our clients, need to look at our businesses and our firms, whatever we're calling them, right, as experiments, and they're ongoing, they're works in progress. And accountants, CPAs, if they're anything, they're conservative, right? When it comes to their businesses, their
Yeah.
business practices, a little too much probably, right? Especially, the
Yeah.
ones that have been in business for longer. And so,
Sure.
you tell them about different, aspects of the business model, a different way of pricing, a different way of measuring productivity within the firm, and a different way of handling your client relations, and it really tends to freak them out a little bit, right? Like,
Mhm.
it's not what they're used to. So based on your experience, right, of starting this, from scratch, and learning it as you're going, based on the experience since you started, what would you tell an attorney, an accountant, really any kind of professional, service-based professional that has been working on the traditional model? What would you tell them to kind of, maybe get them over the hump, or at least kind of allay some of their fears about completely overhauling their business model, to switch to something like
Yeah.
subscription or even fixed fee, or something that's different from the
Right.
traditional models?
Yeah. So what I always tell people is you can start small. So let's just say that, I had been doing the last 10 years, billing hourly. Probably what I would do is I'll do like a little subscription on the side, see who's interested, see how that goes, still keep my hourly practice, still keep everything as it is. And then, in essence, and I think I've said this on other podcasts where I've talked to lawyers about this, your first year should be optimizing for feedback, basically. Like you want to do things, get feedback, be honest, find out what's working, what's not working. And then, if you need, get help, also like literally get someone who can kind of walk you through, okay, here's how you build the system. So you're not, you know, so things are going well or whatever. But yeah, I just tell people start small. Like you don't have to jump in and we're in an age now where you don't have to have even a fully fledged out product. You could just offer it to your clients and be like, almost anybody could set up a recurring payment portal and be like, hey, if you want to try this, I'm going to do this thing where, how on my bills, it's like, you get all these hourly charges you don't like. If you're part of this, those will go away, and that might be what the subscription is. You know what I mean? And so for everybody, it's going to be different, and it's going to, I think, depend on who their clients are. It's going to depend on what price point they want. I mean, we started our subscription at a specific price point, that's we then work backwards and like, what can we offer for that? So, but I can imagine if someone's like dealing with, Fortune 500 companies, their subscription is going to be radically different than what I'm offering. You know, it might be more comprehensive and it might be $10,000 a month or something. So yeah, I mean, I really would say experiment, and like during that first year, don't, yeah, and it's like anything else. I think you have to develop those skills as a business owner and an innovator. Like if it's never something you've done, to be patient with yourself. So if you're like, this is a new thing, it might take time. It might take you a year. It might take you 2 years before you kind of really feel like you know what you're doing.
Yeah, so you mentioned the price point and how that might differ depending on what niche or sector of the market you're going after. So you said you knew $500 an hour wasn't going to work for the kind of client you were going
Right.
after. How did you settle on a price point, and how did you decide this is what I'm framing the scope as? This is what I think a prospective client would pay for it. This is the price. How did you come up with that number, and what have been your thoughts about that number? Have you revised it? Have you increased it? Like, how has that actual price point changed over the time since you've had it?
Yeah, so we're still at the original price, which, and that's something we're actually reevaluating because it's actually okay. So we picked that price honestly arbitrarily, right? I'm like $95 a month. That sounds good. Now, what can I do for that price? And also at the time, I think I was able to take that risk because my living expenses were really low. I didn't have any kind of office. It was just me. Like so, there was so if everything messes up, I'm the only one who suffers a little bit. Whereas now, like I definitely have to be more thinking about it because there's other people who work for us who need to make sure everything's okay. But anyway, so yeah, it was an arbitrary decision. It's been that way for a while. I want to raise it, but and I think that's always an issue of like, especially when it's something that people have, got accustomed to, like maybe they've been paying that amount for years. The question becomes, well, what's going to be the reaction? Not even just emotionally, but like financially. Like, is there a point at which, we lose, half our customers, like, you know what I mean? And so that's actually something we're trying to figure out now because actually kind of a hard problem. But one thing we've even seen is that there's people who are incredulous that they're gonna get that price is high enough. They're like, "I don't understand how you can do it for that price," you know? And
That's what
so
I
there are
thought. That's what
definitely
I
people
thought
who are
when I
like,
first saw it. I was like, really?
yeah,
I can have an attorney for this
I
much?
know. I know. I know. So and I think about that and obviously inflation is an issue, and I want to stay ahead of that. And then also like we're way better, as lawyers than we were when we started, and I see now and I see like, communities for like different mentors or coaches and stuff that are kind of getting close to our price point. And I'm like, well, we're lawyers. Like this is like a premium service. We're not just like someone who's going to get in there and motivate you and tell you the business stuff that everybody else can tell you. We're actually going to tell you, professional information that is solid, you know?
Have you thought about maybe differentiating into tiers, right? So maybe you have a tier that
Yeah.
you keep at that original price point, but then or only goes up slightly, and then you have additional tiers that maybe pull in some of these fixed fee services or something like that, or some sort of advanced service level that's at a higher price point.
Yeah, I mean, I've thought about that, but I've always kind of moved away from it because one thing I did want to try to do is keep it simple. I wanted to have again, I've mentioned earlier, I think I'm kind of a fan of Apple and just anyone who can market and have like a really clear uh, offering where it's like the customer doesn't have to think too much. They're just like, oh, okay, they have one thing, that's what I want. I can just buy it right now.
I run into this
So
with
that,
there are a lot of value based price proponents and subscription model proponents that will talk a lot about menu pricing, right? Have your three different tiers, a
mm,
bronze, silver, gold kind of level, and I always struggle with that because for a couple of reasons. One, I'm worried that the client is going to pick the lower tier based on the lower price and not what they actually need, right? Whereas like
yeah,
if I had just put together a bespoke package for them, I would have picked something at a higher level because that's what they actually need. And then the other one is
yeah,
I always struggle with just like how much can I differentiate? Can I really differentiate what I want to do for every client into three neat sort of tiers,
right,
right? Like I kind of and this is just bad on my fault, on my part, but I kind of want to be there to do everything for everybody, right?
yeah,
I don't want to get an email and say, well, this client only signed up for the bronze package, so I've got 48 hours to reply to them as opposed to the gold package, so I
right,
need to reply right back to them right now. I don't want to have
yeah.
to work through all of that. It's simpler on my end, not just the client's end too, right?
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, there is, one of the things we did try to do, and the reason we can actually offer the price that we do is by keeping the back, like I guess the background stuff, the admin stuff really streamlined. So you're right. Like adding another tier does require someone, and whether it's done by a computer, which requires a system and it's automated, fine, but usually it requires like a person, to kind of make that call. And that adds a whole other tier of like decision making, not even decision making, but just like, places where things can go wrong. As I find with people, they'll try to shoehorn themselves into like a higher tier. Come on, you can just answer this one email for me. You know what I mean? Like, well, then why did I do a higher tier in the first place?
Yeah, yeah, I get that.
Thought about it though. Yeah. And we even tried doing some stuff that we do on a flat fee. Early on, we tried it as a subscription, and I find that things with like defined deliverables didn't really work as well actually, because people aren't really, then it takes what's meant to be like a relationship into very transactional.
Yeah.
And every month they're on, and it's not like, so with trademarks is a if someone figures that out, awesome, they kick ass. But
Well, I was about to say,
trademarks,
like,
the time is
yeah,
so,
like a client of
yeah,
mine, they need their books done every month. They need their payroll done every month. They
yeah.
don't, a client
So
wouldn't need a
okay,
new
you
trademark
can
every
do it.
month, right? And so
No,
yeah,
but trademark times vary, so
yeah.
so that what we would see is like, if someone has some kind of complicated trademark, or, what happened a lot. I mean, you probably get this too, where, you're like, hey, like, I need you to send me such and such and such and such in order for the thing to move forward. You email them, you email them, you email them. They don't respond. 3 months go by, and then they get mad at you, like, hey, why did you bill me for those 3 months? You didn't do anything, you know? So that kind of stuff didn't work, because their mind is always on that endpoint and not kind of like getting value every month.
So on that fixed fee pricing for the services that you're doing for a fixed fee, what's your collection policy look like? Are you waiting until it's done to collect? Are you doing some up front? Are you doing all up front? Like, what's your philosophy as far as actually collecting the payment for fixed fee work?
100% upfront. Again, I worked in creative industries for a long time. So, they're big fans of not paying people. So, my whole thing is, if you're not going to pay me, tell me before I work, you know? And then, we also offer, like, we use like buy now, pay later. So, if someone has like a cash, then if someone does need financing for something, it's out of our hands. It's like, hey, you apply with them, you decide if you're good, they'll tell us and they'll send us the money. If you're not, then okay. You
So you're
know,
not worrying about
I
AR.
don't want to work with you on that level, because, I don't want to be chasing anybody for money.
Yeah, you're not worrying about AR, accounts receivable, and chasing chasing deadbeat clients.
Yeah, no, and I know how it goes, and I know that's a big issue for a lot of law firms, and I know, and it might be the same thing for CPAs, where, you have to write off a certain percentage. This person's just not going to pay, and you're not going to haul them to small claims court. It's like, he's going to move on, but at the same time, it's a loss, and so for me, I'm just like, yeah, you might as well pay up front,
I see posts in Facebook groups for bookkeepers and tax preparers all the time, right? I finished the return. I haven't heard from the client in 3 months. What do I do, right? I've sent them
Mhm.
invoice after invoice. I've tried to get them to sign the documents. I don't get a response. What do I do? Well, you move on, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah,
a bookkeeper does a cleanup job, right? I put 10 hours into cleaning up their books for last year and sent them the invoice and nothing happened, right? It's like,
yeah,
yeah, and so I always come back with the same advice: get paid up front, right? Get your
yeah.
money first. You don't get to take the tube of toothpaste out of the store and use all the toothpaste and then pay for it, right? Like, you got to pay for it
Right.
first before
It's
you
like
can take it
everything
home.
else. Yeah, it's like so many other things, I mean, and yeah, I mean, it's just like, if the person knows, like, they've committed to spend that money, then what difference does it make if they get it before or after I've rendered service? And I think that's, it also makes it important for us to build that trust, and sort of, make sure that, if someone is going to give me money up front, they need to know that it's going to happen. So that's why our whole thing, and this is kind of almost our flywheel, is to optimize for good experience so that we get good reviews. Because then that trust is built by me saying, just go on Google, go on Yelp, you'll see what people say. And then if you decide that looks right, then you'll know. And people will, oh shit, well, okay, I'm gonna pay, you know?
Yeah, if you're waiting 3 months to collect, it's not your money anymore. Congratulations.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Yep.
gone. And at the beginning, we actually have like, I think we, for whatever reason, we decided to keep like the first person who ever stiffed us. Like their invoice is still in our system, like way at the bottom, like just there, like it's been there for like 7 years or something, you know?
Kind of like how you go to
not
some
not ready.
bars and the first dollar's tacked on the wall. You've got your
Yep.
first your
Yeah,
first non-paid
exactly.
invoice in the
Yeah, and it's like, it's we're never gonna see that money, but we kind of joke every time we're doing that. Well, hey, should we send him a reminder? And like, it's 7 years. I don't even know where the guy is.
Well, let's
So
let's talk on the tech side and the sort of nerdy side. So, how are you actually running this firm from a tech perspective? What are you using to manage the subscriptions? What are you using to manage your firm from a tech and
mhm.
application standpoint?
Okay, so for tech, we use we use a software called Recurly, which is, and there's other products, but this is like I found the most robust one. It's more expensive than a lot of them. I mean, it's actually gone up a lot in price over the last few years. It's still good because it's super like, super detailed. Like it can do stuff where like if someone's credit card number changes, it can actually get the updated number, stuff like that. So Recurly is really good. And then we moved, I think it might have been like 2 or 3 years ago, we moved to a platform called Mighty Networks, which is essentially a membership site. So then we've linked those two things together, where basically Recurly tells Mighty, hey, like someone signed up, let them into the network, and then when someone leaves, kick them out. So it's those are kind of, I'd say, the core. And then obviously around that we have Slack, where we get notifications. So anytime someone joins, we have a Slack channel that basically tells the admin team, hey, get this person set up, send them, and we use a lot of actually like email automation, so like Mixmax, autopilot, stuff like that, to send the standard stuff like, hey, welcome, like we got your payment, you're in, click here to go to the network, here's your guide, like, so that's all automated. But then we'll have tasks for the admin team to be like, hey, like just check in with them, get them scheduled for their first appointment or whatever.
So when you say go to the network, is that some sort of like a client portal?
Yeah, basically it's a client portal. So like Mighty Networks is like, it's kind of like a community site, but in there, we post content. It's usually us posting like articles or videos or whatever. And then in there, like we've embedded like the our call calendar. And we've embedded like a type form where people can upload documents. So that's the kind of stuff that we're using. I would love, and there are actually like there's Kimberly Bennett, who's another lawyer. Maybe Jeremy, I don't know if you've ever encountered her on the internet. She's really cool, but they've actually made a software that I think encapsulates a lot of this. I don't use it just because I already have my own system, but I think now as this idea matures, I think there's software that's designed for running the whole system.
So John, one of my favorite questions they ask attorneys, and I ask every attorney I ever meet ever, is kind of what are some of the demarcation lines when you're working with accountants on the other side of a business owner? In other words, like, should the accountant set up the LLC? Should the accountant set up the business
Mm,
license? Who does what, and what do you see most commonly?
gotcha. Usually what I say, and tell me if this is like, if I need to change this, but my sort of initial impulse is if it involves money or numbers, talk to the accountant. I'm not, like, again, if it's not going to be for me to say, and I'll tell them like, hey, here's my personal opinion about it. Like, here's what I've seen, but you also need to get someone who can run you through the numbers, help you understand, what all of that looks like, or especially even with, like with tax stuff, like, who's qualified to give that advice, So, and then, on the converse, what I usually say for setting up a company, I usually say it's better to have a lawyer do it because, as we were saying before, I think, um, you have to have the operating agreement, et cetera. And that's usually something that merits legal advice. So like if the three of us were going to start a business and, we want to have an operating agreement that says what percentage, what contributions, et cetera. There's some legal issues there, so I usually say like, for forming the company, usually easier to have the lawyer do it. So you don't have to have like the accountant, like, okay, I filed the stuff with the Secretary of State and not go to the lawyer to get the operating, you know.
So basic gist: if there's money or numbers involved, that's the accountant.
I mean, that's pretty much like, what do you think of that? I mean, I feel like that's, it's obviously kind of,
I think the flip side is if it's words, let
broad,
the attorney do it, right? Like if it's
Yeah,
written, if
right.
it's a
I mean, it might
contract, an
be, yeah, it
agreement,
might
something like
be,
that.
yeah,
Yeah, right.
maybe that's the implication there.
I think where it gets weird is with business licenses.
With business licenses, that's actually one, I usually tell clients, like, we don't, just because that's more administrative, we usually don't help with that. Like unless it's something where, there's some kind of legal issue. Usually it's just like I tell them, it's like, fill out the forms, give them the information they're asking for. Like, you should have it, like, where are you going to do the business? What kind of business? How many square feet is your place? Whatever it is they're asking, tell them. I mean, it's sort of like, I'm a lawyer, and, I have a license. And so do I need, obviously I'm a lawyer, don't need legal help necessarily, but would I have if I wasn't a lawyer? No, it's pretty simple. Here's my social, here's where I live. Here's all the stuff you're asking me for. Here's the proof that I graduated law school, whatever, it doesn't require much, analysis or anything.
I've even had accountants push back on something like registering for payroll tax for withhold estate withholding and unemployment. I think for the most part accountants are fine registering for payroll taxes. I do, but yeah, I think there's always do what
we do not.
You do not, yeah,
we
for payroll tax.
Mm-mm.
See that there's a lot of this sort of gray area, right? Because is this an entity function or is this a tax function? And I think that's a lot of times where and there are some things like payroll registration, right, which is kind of both, right? You need to register in order to be able to file the taxes, but the registration part of it is what gets a lot of accountants hung up.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure there's differences of opinions, and there's definitely places where you can have an overlap or it's not quite clear. But I'd say honestly, for like 95%, it feels pretty clear to me. Where, and I actually like referring work to accountants, because then I feel like someone's in good hands, and then the accountant likes us. So that's a nice thing too. Like, we have a few different accountants who we constantly are sending work to. I'm like, yeah, I can't help you, but talk to this guy; he'll help you.
I did have one interaction where the client was going back and forth between me and his attorney because they wanted to make payments to the partners. And I came back with, well, what does your operating agreement say? And he said, I don't know. Let me go ask the attorney. And the attorney said, just let the CPA figure it out. and I said, well, no, this is an operating agreement question, right? Yeah. So we and I think this went on for like 3 or 4 days, where the attorney just said, let the CPA figure it out, and the CPA kept saying, I need the attorney to tell me what to do, right? Because I'm not going to interpret the operating agreement. That's a contract, right? And so, yeah, I definitely think there are these situations where if you don't have a good sync between finance and legal, then it puts the client it can put the client in an awkward situation.
Yeah. And then sometimes in those cases, sometimes I've found even with those, it's maybe like a 50-50 kind of thing where, I'll say, look, here's what I can tell you. Here's what I see in the operating agreement. What I'm not clear on is this part. This is the part for the accountant. But I usually try to say, I don't just be like, hey, go back. If there's something I can do, I do. And again, it might be something where you meet in the middle, and how far in the middle of this, I don't know, but it's not, maybe not always 100% in some of these things.
So out of curiosity, if the optimal situation is that the client has both an attorney and an accountant, how often do you see that situation? In other words, like, how often does a client have one or the other, not both? And how often are they bringing those two people together?
It's hard to say. I mean, they rarely, like I say, bring us together in any way, but like, because usually at the beginning, one of the questions I actually ask people when they're forming a company, just to make sure, I'm like, hey, do you have someone who can help you with accounting, finance, and taxes and stuff? And then if sometimes I'll refer, like, if, I'm like, you should. So I'll usually recommend. There's a lot of people who, again, I think they come to an attorney and are like, oh, you can do everything like that. Everything that's complicated in business, you'll help me with. And I'll say, well, no, like, just so you know, most businesses are going to have these two people. Like, this is just what it's going to be. And, sometimes that's even a sell. And, I'll be selling the, accountant service. I'm like, look, if they can save you in taxes or frustration or time, it's worth it. It's money well spent.
Mm-hmm. So, Jeremy, I think we've had a wide ranging conversation about subscription models and how we can go beyond just accounting services in a subscription model, and how we can go beyond just what we typically think of a subscription model. So what are some of the key takeaways for you? And you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, absolutely. So for sure. And, feel free to, clarify here, John, but one I think is, don't be afraid to experiment, and don't be afraid to do this on a very limited basis. Right. So if inside your own practice, you're thinking, man, I'm sick of tracking hours. I'm sick of billing clients for time. I want to try this, but I'm scared, right? Because it's all I've ever known. Then yeah, just sort of carve out a small subset of your existing, more forgiving clients, and just ask them if they're willing to be guinea pigs for, this new offering. And it
Yeah.
might be something they find even more value out of.
Yeah. You can just ask them too, like, hey, if I offered this, would you be interested? And then, if everybody says no, absolutely not, that tells you something, and then maybe even follow up and ask, well, what was it about it that you didn't like? Was it the price? Was it just seemed strange? You don't understand it. What is it?
For sure. Absolutely. So, John, if somebody's listening to this and, we're more so on, as far as our listeners with accountants than, what might be actual clients. But if we've got a listener who's saying, I've got a client that this sounds like it'd be perfect for, where should they send that client to get in touch with you?
Yeah. So the easiest thing to do is go to counselforcreators.com. So when you go on there, you can just give us a call, submit a contact form, and then, from there we have our whole system that can help you get to what you need, so that's how we have it set up. That's usually the easiest thing I tell people.
Fantastic. And just real quick, so creators, are we looking at only individuals, or are you working with any sort of startups or small businesses, anything like that, or is it just purely individuals?
No, it's meant to be sort of, broadly, like including businesses, yeah, I mean, it's all across the board. I mean, usually, like what I tell people, the people who get the most out of working with us, there's going to be some creative aspect to it, So, maybe someone who's running a gas station, we can help them, but less so than someone who's making a film. I mean, but I mean, if you're doing a gas station, might need an LLC for it or something, or a contract or whatever. But I'll say, like, we can really help you if it's something creative, and there's more stuff that we can offer.
Good deal. Awesome. Well, John, thank you so much for being on the show. Really, really impressed with leading the charge in the legal industry in favor
Cool.
of getting rid of the billable hour and moving to a different model of working with clients and getting them the help that they need on an ongoing basis through a subscription model. Chris, thanks to you for being here. And thanks to our listeners, of course. And this is Jeremy Wells with the CPA Advisory Show. Have a good one.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, John.
Hey, it's Jeremy. Thanks for watching the CPA Advisory Show here on YouTube. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, like, and leave us a comment. We'll probably read your comment on the air. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at CPA Advisory Show. And if you have an idea for a topic or guest you'd like to see, email us at host@cpaadvisoryshow.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.